All right, welcome everybody. We are here for a very, very, very exciting workshop that I lucked out twice today. So my name is Mina. I'm one of the board members, and Randa assigned all of the board members to their room assignments so we can introduce people. And I'm lucky to be able to introduce Kristina twice today. She already blessed us earlier with a workshop with Dr. Helen, who's also here. And the workshop that we're doing now, and this is the second time that I have had it ready, and then my Google thing closes, and then I stand here and I go, which one was it again? Orthodox Expressive Arts. Nope. Caring. Nope. Yes. Okay. Make us glad as many years as we have seen evil, the transformational capacity of art therapy in trauma treatment. So, Kristina's here. I'm very excited to introduce her once again. And she's a board-certified art therapist and a credentialed art therapy supervisor. She received her MPS in art therapy and creativity development from Pratt Institute in 2011. So she's got a lot of clinical, theological experience to share with us today. And it looks like, based on the materials in the back, that we get to do a little bit of art. Is that right? Yes! Awesome! So as a quick aside, since I only have to introduce one person today for this one instead of three, I'm going to share that as an orthopedic surgeon, I have told the people that run the operating room that they should have art therapy for the surgeons, where it's like a little arts and crafts table that they set up so that if, we're a little frustrated and like we had a little bit of an extra turnover time and it's taking us too long to get in the room, they say, can we direct you to the origami table that we've set up for today? And it just keeps us busy and, it's a little therapeutic. So, so they give me origami paper to play with while I'm...
Yeah, if you need a consultant.
Absolutely. No, I'll give them your name. I'll be like, oh, my friend Kristina does art therapy, and we should do it for all the surgeons. And all of a sudden, like the stress levels in the OR is going to go shoom, like that. So without further ado, Kristina.
All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop. What to expect today. So we're going to establish some relative safety. I think that's important when we're talking about trauma. Then we'll engage in art experiential. We'll talk about trauma and trauma recovery, how art therapy fits into trauma recovery, and then an Orthodox Christian approach to healing, and end with some more artwork. So first off, establishing relative safety. As you can see by this microphone, Ancient Faith Radio is recording this session, and this will live on the internet until the second coming of Christ. So just be mindful when you're sharing about your experience or an experience of a parishioner, client, patient, family member, that the audience extends beyond this room at this time. And so keep that in mind as you're sharing. If there's something you'd like to discuss privately, I'm available all weekend. You can come up to me at the conference and discuss something afterwards. I've also provided my contact information in the slide packet that you have. So feel free to email me, contact me if you think of something a week from now, tomorrow, 5 months from now. I'm happy to help. The other thing is that we are discussing trauma today. And I will be sharing artwork that depicts physical violence. And this can be activating. So if you feel activated during this session, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Move towards comfort. If that means stepping out of the room to take a break, if that means getting up and moving around. We also have a lot of art materials in the back if you want to grab some modeling clay or some other art materials to use that to help ground yourself. Do whatever you need to do. And finally, the artwork that I'm sharing today has been created by my clients in the context of a confidential therapy session. And they've given me permission to show their artwork in the workshop setting, but not to just distribute their artwork generally, broadly. So in the copy of the slides that you have, the artwork is omitted the copy of the slides that will be on linked to the recording, the artwork is omitted. And I ask that when those artwork slides are up, you don't take any pictures or recording of them, just out of respect for my former clients. All right, so let's get into making some art. Okay, first of all, I want to say you don't have to have any experience to make art. This is an invitation, not a demand. And what I'd like to invite you to do is to create an image or object that represents your concept of trauma. This can be a felt sense, a metaphor, it could be abstract, or it could be realistic. We're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to create this piece using any of the materials that are along the back wall. I know that that's not a lot of time to make art, but I really want to get you into that doing rather than thinking too much about this experience. So feel free to go grab your supplies. It'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to check in, see what everyone's experience was like. Is this too high, or is it okay?
No,
okay.
I mean, whatever's most comfortable for you. Get it like, is this good? Yeah. And you already put the slides.
All right, so if everyone could find their stopping place. And we have just a little bit of time for maybe 2 people to share, if you feel comfortable, about what your experience was like or what you created right now in response to the directive. Yeah.
Yes.
I felt really drawn to the clay because it's really nice to work with your hands. So I created, can you hold the mic for me? Because I can't show everyone. Okay, so I created, thank you. I'm not especially artistic, so this is a person over here, sure. And I know when I was going through a real period of trauma in my life, it felt like there was a hole kind of going through my chest. So I put my, what is that called? Pipe cleaner through that artistic thing. I put it through the chest of the little person who's kind of slumped over. And then I connected the other end of the pipe cleaner to what I felt like was the light of Christ, but it feels really dark when you're in a space of trauma, and it feels like you can't reach that. And then all of the little red along the way was like all of the pain and the hurtful memories I had to overcome in order to get to the light.
Does someone else want to share your experience? Yeah.
So, if you could bring it up to the front, please. Sorry. Thank you.
So I started with, I laid down lots of different pretty colors because I feel like, life when it's joyous and just ordinary has all these different elements to rejoice in and just to enjoy. And so all the different pretty colors, blue and purple and green and yellow, etc. But trauma it's like this. First of all, it settles onto your life and it messes it all up. It's like this dark cloud that comes, and it feels like it's permeated and suffocating, and I'm still there, but I can't shine through, and little bits escaping still. So there's some hope, but I feel like this dark cloud has to somehow dissipate, and how to get out from under it. So.
Hey, thank you. One more person want to share?
I'll share.
Okay.
So, this is like what trauma felt when it happens, just like really black bleeding, like it just, sometimes it stops, just like a pool of blood, but there's always hope, like there's something bigger than us, like this represents nature and the stars, like or the saints, like so I heard that in the previous session, and it made me think like there's the light of Christ, there are the stars, the saints, there's the body, it's bigger creation, and then a butterfly, of course, like transformation and going towards that. So.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you all for participating and making some artwork, and for those of you who shared your experience. I'd like to start with this quote by Chinua Achebe from the book Things Fall Apart. They have not found the mouth with which to tell of their suffering. And I feel like this really relates to trauma because it's so often difficult to encapsulate our traumatic experience with words. And that's where art therapy comes into helping in trauma treatment and recovery. So to talk about traumatic experience, how I'm defining it today is an event that overwhelms the nervous and emotional systems combined with insufficient supports. These supports are both internal and interpersonal. So how do I cope with an experience? How do I perceive the events? How am I able to adapt? And who can I go to? Who will help me to regulate my physical and emotional systems? Who will help me make sense of what happened? So if I don't have those supports, this experience is much more impactful to our system. So trauma impairs the ability to regulate and integrate experiences. It causes change to our perception of the world, of relationships, of ourselves. It changes our memory. It changes our physiology. It damages the capacity. It damages the capacity for imagination and creativity, and we see this oftentimes with children who come into treatment. They get involved in this sense of like stuck play, this repetitive over and over again. We may feel like we're stuck. There's no other outcomes. There's no way out. It also separates the survivor from the community. So this might be a self-separation, so a sense of shame, so I can't be a part of my community anymore. Or it might be community rejects me because I've shared my experience of trauma. Or it could be a loss of the community. If we think about people who are refugees losing their sense of community, somebody who's experienced combat-related trauma and then is discharged from the military, losing that sense of community. And all of those things cause feelings of helplessness, terror, shame, incompetence, and loneliness. So when we think about trauma recovery, the first place that we start is with respect for the person that we're treating. Bonnie Badenoch, who wrote In the Heart of Trauma, says, "I don't believe I have found any other offering that is more empowering than respect." And we need that respect in order to establish safety. So Judith Herman has said that there's 3 phases of recovery. First, establishing safety. So this includes how we are in relationship with our client, establishing routines, rituals, a sense of safety, helping the survivor regain control over the body and the environment. Again, that helps with the routine. Know what to expect. Then we move into one of remembrance and mourning. So the survivor retells the story of their trauma to integrate the memory, not to exercise the memory. So in the last presentation, we heard a lot about memory, and we heard a lot about how we don't forget our experiences, but we want to put them in the proper place. So integrate this experience, and the therapist acts as a witness and ally. And this is really important because telling the truth to somebody else in the presence of another person is powerful and restorative. And the final phase of trauma recovery, we are reconnecting with ordinary life. So again, we've integrated this experience, we put it in its rightful place in our history, and it's no longer the central focus of our life. And we may also be finding meaning with this experience. So for this to happen, first, no one can heal from trauma on their own. You need to be in a relationship, in a supportive relationship, in order for the healing to take place. We need to empower the survivor so that we can restore the sense of agency, and that comes from having them participate in their recovery. So many people who've experienced trauma have said no and had that rejected, have had things happen to them, upon them. And so we don't want the therapeutic experience to be another experience where we're doing something to them, but they're involved in the treatment. It's an embodied approach. So we're helping them to restore the sense of control over the body, and we do that through co-regulation and self-regulation. If I am able to regulate my emotional state, my physical state, then I can help somebody else regulate themselves so that they can self-regulate. So we have this cycle of co-regulation and self-regulation. We have this integration of the experience so they can distinguish the past from the present. So many of traumatic memories feel like you're back in the event and it's taking place again. So we're able to put that in its rightful place and be here in the present moment. And then a restoration of relationship with the community. So coming back together with a community that's supportive. So where does art therapy fall into this? Well, as Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, says, without imagination, there is no hope, there is no chance to envision a better future, there is no place to go, and no goal to reach. So we must tap into that source of creativity and imagination to regain a sense of hope. What is art therapy? When I tell somebody that I'm an art therapist, a lot of times the response is like, oh, I color all the time. I do art therapy, right? And while making art on your own can definitely have healing properties, it can be a way to cope, reduce stress, express yourself. That is not what art therapy is. So we have Art Robbins, the late Art Robbins, who established the art therapy program at Pratt, where I went to school. He would say that art therapy is a concrete implementation of theory introduced by the art therapist at the appropriate time to facilitate creative and therapeutic change. So again, this relationship, facilitating an intervention for change. Judith Rubin, who is an art therapist, an author, and also, fun fact, was friends with Mr. Rogers, would say that art therapy is helping people to find their own imagery, and in so doing, to find their authentic selves. And then Kathy Malchiotti, who is an art therapist, author, known for her work in trauma, would say that art therapy uses a nonverbal language of art for personal growth, insight, and transformation. It's a means of connecting what is inside of us, our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, with outer realities and life experience. So similar to trauma, it must take place in the context of a supportive relationship. If you're coloring in a coloring book, that's great, but that's not art therapy. We need that other person to help you observe, witness, gain insight, make an intervention. It's experiential. Again, we empower the clients to take action. You have to participate in art therapy and make art, create this piece. It's a strengths-based approach. So we're not so much concerned with, are you a great artist? I have people that come to me all the time. I can't draw, I can't paint, I only have the use of one hand. And we can work with what you have. So we're not focusing on your lack of ability, but what your abilities are. It's an embodied approach. So we take thoughts, feelings, ideas, these internal experience, and create something that's external, that's outside of us, that we can now look at, examine, observe. It takes action and reflection. So we create the art piece, and then we step away from that process and look at the piece, observe it, describe it, reflect on it. And then there's a restoration of relationship with the community. I can think of numerous times where I've worked with somebody and they've created a piece of art, and that has changed their status within the community, within the institution. Other staff members start looking at them differently. Their peers are like, wow, you made that? That's great. I didn't know you can do that. It brings them into the community through making art. So I want to share a couple of case studies to show how art therapy works in trauma treatment. And I want to start with Isaiah, and I'll go through how we established a therapeutic relationship, how he was empowered during the art therapy treatment, how he regained control of his body, and also how he integrated the experience. So when Isaiah was about 2 years old, he witnessed his father attempting to choke his mother. She survived, and she left the relationship. So I saw him in the context of a therapeutic preschool when he was about 3.5, 4 years old. He was terrified of going into the bathroom, and so he wasn't potty trained. He also had very limited speech, so maybe 2 to 3 word phrases at the most. And so we met for once a week for 30 minutes. He also saw speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists as well. And in those weekly sessions, I followed his lead and offered choices of materials. So he picked drawing at first, and he was drawing these faces, focusing on eyes, drawing spiders. And about 5 sessions into our work together, he drew a picture of mommy and then added mommy's boo-boos. So I said to him, mommy's boo-boos? And he said, mommy's boobies, and started laughing. And so I was like, okay, we're bringing up the trauma, but you're not ready to talk about it yet. In the next session, he created another drawing of mommy's boo-boos, and I asked him if he would like to put Band-Aids on mommy's boo-boos. And he said yes. So here we have an experience of making art where he's moving from this role of a bystander, observer, helpless, powerless, to being able to now take care of his mother and intervene. So we did this for several sessions. Then he wanted to work with clay, and we created these figures. So he created a boogeyman and Superman, and we stayed with that metaphor. So the boogeyman and Superman would fight, they would destroy each other, and he would ask me to rebuild the figures. We did that for several weeks. Then we started introducing other characters. As we moved towards termination, because my time at the preschool was coming to an end, I started to ask him if he could repair the figures instead of me. So again, this co-regulation for self-regulation, this integration of the experience. During this time, his speech improved, and he also started using the bathroom and was potty trained. In our final session, we went through all of the artwork. He looked over the image of mommy's boo-boos with the Band-Aid, and I asked him if mommy was still hurt, and he said no, and he went through and took all the Band-Aids off before taking the pieces home. Next, we have the case of Alex, again showing how we established safety and trust through the therapeutic relationship, how he was restored to the community, regained control of his body, and was able to contain the traumatic experience. So Alex is a man in his early 50s. He was an Army vet, a former EMT, and he came into the psychiatric hospital for suicidal ideation and depression after he was attacked by 3 men. So the attack caused physical damage, and he had difficulty walking. He needed a walker, and he also had nightmares. When he first came in, he was laying in bed for days, would not come to groups, was refusing meals. Over maybe after several weeks of this, he made a deal with his provider and his primary therapist that he would come to 1 group a day as a goal. But he definitely wasn't coming to art therapy. He made that very clear. So during this process, this is when I discovered that he was an Army veteran. And I disclosed to him that my dad had been in the Army for 25 years, and I grew up on Army installations. and provided him with some information about transitioning war zone skills to civilian life. I think this is really important because then it's establishing the sense of like our community as being in the military community, and also that seeing his behavior as not something that is disordered, but something that was very effective in a particular place and is no longer effective right now in this place. So you started attending my trauma education groups, getting information about his symptoms, hearing from other patients who were experiencing the same thing, and even at one point he lifted up his shirt to show his wounds from where he was stabbed, and we were able to like witness that, hold that space for him, validate his experience. He did start attending art therapy and told me that he was resistant to come because he had previously been an artist, and now because of his injuries and the medication, he couldn't draw the way that he wanted to. We talked about other forms of art, how he didn't have to draw. He could draw with other materials besides a pencil. But he really focused, he tried a couple of those things, focused on drawing again. So these groups helped to break his isolation. And also starting to drawing for other patients, drawing for staff members, started to restore him to this community, right? He could, even though he physically couldn't do the things that he used to do, he could make a drawing for somebody and they could appreciate it. He could make a sign for the unit that said, "Thank you, first responders." He could give us drawings of ourselves. So he received a lot of positive feedback from that, but he was still having nightmares. And so we discussed creating artwork about his trauma. And he created this drawing over the course of 2 sessions. So this is, he titled it "The Night of No Faces," and it's the night that he was attacked. So each time he worked on it, at the end of the session, he gave it to me, I put it in a folder, I took it back to my office. In the second session, he told me he was finished with it, we went over it. He talked about the shame he felt about not being able to fight off these attackers, things that he could have done differently. We talked about how what he did probably kept him alive, and if he did more, he might not be here. And then I asked him if he wanted to work on this anymore, do anything else to the piece, and he said no, left it with me in the folder, and he stopped having nightmares. Also during this time, he was starting to engage in physical therapy and was able to walk a little bit more. Okay, so how does this all fit in the context of an Orthodox Christian approach to healing? So, make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So this is a psalm that inspired the title of my workshop, and this is also my prayer for my patients every day. So when we think about the Orthodox Christian approach to healing, the trauma-informed approach is an Orthodox Christian approach, right? So it takes place in the context of a relationship with God and with the community of faith. We do have individual time that we pray, but we have to participate in the liturgy, in the sacraments, to have this experience and relationship. We see every person as having the icon of Christ within them, right? So we have this idea of respect for them, not seeing them as disordered or incapable, but seeing them as the icon of Christ. It's an embodied practice. We use our bodies, our 5 senses. We take in the Eucharist to then be the image and the hands and the presence of Christ in the world. When we're baptized, we say that we put on Christ. We're embodying. It's experiential. Again, we have to participate in our healing. We have to approach Christ and want this healing and participate in our worship. It involves action and reflection. We have time for prayer, time for action, and time for meditation and reflection. And then ultimately, all of this comes to restore our relationship to God, to ourselves, and to others, restoring our relationship to the community. So with that, I would like to invite you to create some more artwork. So to take the artwork that you already created in the beginning of the workshop and change it so that you're comfortable taking it with you when you leave this room. You may want to contain the experience, you may want to transform it, or repair your artwork in some way. And I invite you to spend the next few minutes doing that. If anybody has any questions also while you're working on your pieces, I'll be happy to answer them as well. Yes. Oh, could you come up and use the
Please come up to the, I'll bring it back as far as I can.
Thanks. So I think a lot of the trauma your presentation brought up is like acute trauma. But are there any, I'm in the arts too, so I know the answer, but I just want to ask it anyway. For people who've been through complex PTSD, people who've been through repeated, prolonged traumatic events that don't have a specific, one-time event, are there any practices or, frameworks that work for that specific trauma type?
Yeah, I think that in both examples, we're looking still at the same thing of building a relationship, looking at regulation, looking at creating choices. Right? So even in a situation of a patient who is living in a community where there's a lot of crime, where they can't leave the community, there's ways that you can regulate your body systems. There's ways that you could regulate your physiology, your perception of the experience. There are choices that you can make to control the environment, right? So I may not be able, I'm going to use this example from my grandmother. So she told me to keep my keys in my pocket and not in my purse, so that when my purse is stolen, I will still be able to get back into the apartment. Right? That's a way of controlling my environment, of adapting so that the potentially traumatic experience of being mugged, having my purse stolen, I'm able to integrate that experience, have a different approach so that it doesn't reach the level of trauma. So definitely still creating artwork, changing our perception, our imagination, empowering our experience so that we can see the potential. This cup, okay, I could drink water out of it. I can put flowers in it to create a vase. I can turn it upside down. I can hold pencils in it. I can rip it up and create a collage out of it. I can attach several together and create a sculpture. If all of that is what can happen through an art therapy session by looking at the materials differently. And then if I can see this cup in that way, can I approach going into a holiday sober instead of using substances to get through? Can I approach my relationship with somebody else in a different way? So, yeah.
Thank you. You define trauma as event that overwhelms the nervous and emotional systems. What if the event is didn't really happen and the client imagined it? Like we have many clients with difficult mental illnesses. So how to approach? Do you work with the traumas that person perceives happened but didn't happen?
Yeah, my experience working with people with psychosis, I always still follow the information that they're giving me, right? And that's where I work from. So if you're telling me that you don't know if you're the Messiah or an angel or a prophet, but you're trying to figure out which one and it's really stressing you out, then I go with, okay, well, Jesus took naps, and let's talk about your self-care routine and what coping skills that we can implement to help that. If you're saying that your neighbor is using some kind of biological weapon on you that is causing you to change your race, yeah, that sounds really threatening, dangerous, stressful, horrible experience. What can we do to manage that, right?
Are you just making these up on the spot? Or?
No, these are all real things, right? And also, I've had the experience too where there's been I've worked with multiple women who believe that they're pregnant, and we've tested them for pregnancy and they're not. So then I start to talk to them about, well, is this your first baby? And come to find out that they've had to give their children up for adoption, that they've had miscarriages or abortion. And so now that even though they're presenting this delusion as I'm currently pregnant, what we're getting to is the traumatic experience of being pregnant and losing your child. And how do we work with that? How do we heal that? So that maybe this delusion can heal also. Yeah, any other?
Do you ever do training to make them better artists? Because I feel like I could express myself so much better if you showed me actually how to use this.
That is a part of art therapy. That is a part of art therapy. Not so much, and not so much like in a Bob Ross style, this is what we're painting today, but to have, to know how to use the materials enough to be able to express yourself with them. So to know if you intentionally use, printer paper for your watercolor paint, and the paint bleeds through and puts a hole in the paper, and that's what you were going for, great. If you were trying to make a beautiful painting for your mother and that happened, that experience can be frustrating, can invoke some sadness, anger. So being able to teach patients enough about the materials so that they could successfully use them is important.
So next year we'll do a plenary art workshop.
Yeah.
With training and
Yeah. We'll bring one material, we'll look over, show you how to use them.
happy little trees.
Yeah, any other questions?
I was brought to tears by the story of the small child in preschool because I have young children myself. I was wondering if you would talk a little bit more about your interaction with children and maybe how they express themselves differently than adults.
Children are usually more into making art, and tend to take risks a little bit easier. So I think that play art materials are really natural for children to use. Sometime over the course of our education into adulthood, we're told that art is not serious, that we need to focus on serious things and get a real job and be adults, and art is this frivolous thing. So there's that experience. Also, it's because children are developing so quickly, it's easy to see those developmental changes in a short period of time. Whereas working with an adult who has maybe 35 years of a certain behavior or perception, that's not going to change in, a year of therapy. It's going to take several years of working through that. Also, with adults, it's nice because I can say, here are the materials, use them. If you have questions, ask me. With children, there's a lot more of containment of materials and experiences, a lot more of teaching how to use the materials.
A little too much creativity?
Yeah. Although that does happen with adults too. I had a man who just was walking towards the fence of our of our hospital courtyard with glitter and white paint, and I was like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm gonna make magic happen. And he's like, no, we have a plan, there's no magic. So reining that in sometimes, and using the materials to do that. So there's very structured materials, and there's more fluid materials, and so somebody who needs some containment, who needs some boundaries, we would work with more structured materials and then work towards more fluid materials. Any other questions?
It's about as far as it goes. Sorry. Yeah, come here.
Thank you, Kristina. This is amazing. I appreciate it. As a child psychologist early on, I was trained in non-directive play therapy, which of course included art materials, not art therapy, because I don't do that. But I'm curious if you can comment on how you work with kids in a non-directive fashion or a structured fashion. I mean, you just commented sometimes a client needs something more fluid, sometimes more structured. Do you follow that idea that you should let the child lead? Or do you come in with, a clear treatment plan with structure and, you're going to set these goals? Like how do you work in that domain?
Well, it depends.
Always. It's there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So in the service of self-regulation is co-regulation. Whenever I'm working with somebody for the first time, predominantly my work is done in a group setting. So I tend to use, if this is going to be the first group session, I don't really know who's going to be there. I may have some information about them from their chart, but I tend to use things that I can feel grounded while I'm helping them work through this. So again, coming back to structured materials, something that we do often is to create our own mandalas. So either I will, for the case of young children, I'll draw a circle on a piece of paper, and I'll offer them that they can decorate the circle inside, outside, however they'd like. Or if they really don't like circles, they can flip over the paper and draw something on the back. So we have that choice of, you can use this directive or you can create something of your own. But I'm bringing in the materials. Sometimes I'll leave the materials open, but there's also a directive in terms of theme or content. And then if it's somebody, if there's somebody that I'm working with for a while, then, I can trust you with materials and I know how you're going to use them. There can be more open and option choice. Or if we started out with working with a few materials and I saw how you interacted with them and whether that was successful or not, then I might start to structure materials. Again, working with children, I would use a mini bottle of Elmer's glue and tell them that this is their bottle of glue. They can use however much that they want, but once it's done, it's done. So if you want to squeeze all of the glue into the middle of the page, great. But then what's going to happen then with the glue? Oh, it's all on this side and you wanted to glue something on this side of the paper. What do we do? How do we move the glue from here to there? So next week when I bring back the glue, are you going to try the same thing? Or are you going to try something different? So having flexibility within a structure to create that safety for them. We have,
I'd like to tag on because
do you offer, how do you offer insight, and do you comment on the work in a way to help construct meaning, or are you really letting that come from within? And probably.
Yeah, so as art therapists, we're not psychic tea leaf readers that are oh, you made a person with a pipe cleaner going through them, ooh, you need some, right? We're not like that, but we take what you've said about the piece into consideration. And then depending on who I'm working with and what their capability for insight is, we can have a reflection. I could say something like, I observe this, or I notice this about your piece. Did you also notice that? What do you think about that? In other settings, like when I've worked with adults with developmental disabilities, a lot of our work was about using the art and the art material itself in the process. So how do we build communication and relationship? So we have a limited amount of markers, so you have to ask somebody for the markers. They can say no to you. How do you handle when somebody says no to you? How do you as a group decide what the project is going to be and what you're going to make? So that is really more of using the active process of creating art for the therapy rather than just a reflective approach. There's still information that I'm gathering as a therapist, about how, like, are you refusing to ask somebody? Are you choosing instead to only use this marker because that's the first one that you chose? And what interventions can I plan to help encourage you to ask for what you need or what you want? Yeah.
Right. Like the Band-Aid approach.
Yeah.
Like you were guiding him clearly to
Yeah.
have some efficacy. Like
Yeah.
I can do something, right?
Yeah. He could have still said no, like, I don't want to do that. And like,
Fine.
yeah. And then like, all right. Then we would have gone from there and see what happened and where the sessions go.
So you did have some agenda while working with this boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I knew his background, and I was assuming that the trauma would come up somehow in the artwork, but I wasn't like day one, like, hey, I know that this happened to your mom. Let's make some art about it. So you can be healed and fixed. So that's always in the back of the mind of like, this is the goal, this is the treatment goal that we're working towards. But what the client brings to the session, we go with that intervention.